March the 25th, 2026. Guys, a couple important things I'd like to talk about this morning. First of all, thank you, Father, for a beautiful spring day. 60 degrees, real feel 62, sunny, blue skies. You can't beat it. Like air conditioning outside, but very nice. Now, what I want to talk about is, again, the Iranian war. And it says the ongoing war with Iran from February now into March 25th has severely disrupted global food distribution and driven up costs primarily by choking energy and fertilizer supply chains through the Straits of Hormuz. We've talked about it a lot, haven't we? A lot of it's been focused on oil, and we have talked about the loss of food imports. About 80% of that area's food supply comes in through the Straits, headed north into the Persian Gulf. And again, the fertilizer and all that. And all of that's been disrupted. And just like with the oil prices and the futures and how they bought the contracts, everything is going to be running out that was handled for February into March. So we're about to be into April, and again, the oil contracts are down, and all of that signals a very bad food problem for the entire planet. The Straits of Hormuz, approximately 20 to 30% of our global fertilizer and 20% of liquefied natural gas exports pass through this strait. Its effective closure has stranded over 1,000 ships and forced major carriers like Maersk to suspend regional cargo bookings. Shipping delays, rerouting vessels around the Cape of Good Hope have added 10 to 15 days to transit times, tightening vessel supply and increasing freight costs by over 1,000% on some routes. So whatever they're shipping is going to cost 1,000% more than it did before this started. And the strikes on our ports, guys, not only affect the oil, but all the transportation hubs. And it says the strikes on ports, like in Bahrain, and fuel facilities have directly hindered the logistics of food processing and transport. Now, guys, the world organizations are starting to look at this very closely. They see something coming. It says the war has triggered a second wave of inflation as energy shocks filter into food production. That's what this is about. Fertilizer price spikes. Global urea prices jumped 30 to 40% in the first weeks of the war. In the U.S., prices at the New Orleans hub, 32% to $683 per metric ton. So there's 32% added onto anything that's grown with this type fertilizer. Crude oil prices have surged $90 to $100 per barrel, directly increasing the cost of farm machinery, refrigeration, and trucking. Retail food prices in Iran have risen 42% year over year by late 2025, early 2026. That was already started. It started with a lot of it with the bombing campaign to take out their nuclear fields to start with. It says initially, or internationally, the UN World Food Program warns that sustained conflict could push an additional 45 million people into acute hunger. Now, one warning about the WFP is they will do a little bit of exaggeration, especially in the U.S., to try to get more grifting money. But it's not just them that are looking at it. Now, guys, you got the high-risk nations where we're going to see this problem initially hit, but it's going to spread worldwide very quickly, because when you're talking 20 to 30% a decrease of anything with the population we have now, that's a lot of folks. The high-risk nations, the countries that are heavily reliant on Gulf fertilizers or food imports, including India, a very large population, maybe the world's largest, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Kenya face the most immediate threats to crop yields and price stability. Both of those are going to be moved across the ocean very quickly to us. Critical commodities are rice for South Asia. Even a 5 to 10% price increase is considered detrimental to millions. They can't afford it. If they have the fertilizer and the other stuff, they need to grow it. We're going somewhere with this. With corn and wheat, high nitrogen requirements make these crops particularly a problem to the fertilizer squeeze. In the U.S., we're already seeing people not growing corn, but growing soybeans more because it requires less fertilizer, but it has a lot less protein and nutrients. Now, in the UK, the National Farmers Union has warned of imminent price hikes for tomatoes and cucumbers due to the high greenhouse heating cost. And they've had that problem for quite a while now. I know at least 10 years ago there was articles about a disruption in the natural gas in that area. May have been some type of Russian deal. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the greenhouses were brought up then, guys, because it's a cooler temperature and they have to climate control everything, and it takes natural gas. So I hope you understand how far and quickly this is spreading. Now, when we look at this, guys, and you're talking about possible starvation and famine happening very quickly, then again, it will be a worldwide problem, and it will get to a point in about 3 different areas of no return, not back to the way it was. But it says in the context of the Iran war, the point of no return for starvation can be understood through 3 critical lenses: the humanitarian timeline, the clinical biological threshold, and the systematic famine declaration. Guys, we haven't had to face this here like this, not right in your face yet. Other nations have. It says in the UN Food Program, or the United Nations World Food Program, WFP, again, you got to watch these guys, and other international agencies have identified June the 26th as a critical threshold. We're not that far away. This June warning, if the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz blockade persists through June, an additional 45 million people are projected to be pushed into acute hunger. Guys, you got to add the last time I counted or saw any kind of report, we were over 8 billion people on the earth. And to me, that's hard to feed anyway because of the changing weather and the storms and the floods and the droughts. It's already hard enough. Anyway, it says the surge would bring the global total of food insecure individuals to a record 363 million. A level analyst describes as a terrible prospect that could overwhelm existing aid infrastructures like Feed the Nations and all that. And, you know, we don't know where all of that money goes. It seems to be grifting every time you turn around, doesn't it? But anyway, even if it was straight above the board, the food came in, donations bought the food, and the food went straight to the people. It could already overwhelm that at 363 million people, guys, and we're just talking about June, okay? Now, that other point was the clinical point of no return. They're talking about organ failure. Guys, this is something that's a little hard to digest this early in the morning. I understand that, but time is now rapidly pushing us to this point. And if it's the biblical point that I'm looking at, then there's not much turning back once this gets set into motion. But it says biologically, the point of no return occurs when the body transitions from consuming stored fat to breaking down essential tissues for survival. Guys, what that damages your heart so bad, and your diaphragm. But muscle and organ consumption. Once fat reserves are exhausted, the body begins consuming muscle protein, including the heart and the diaphragm. This leads to weakened cardiac function and respiratory failure. We've seen it before in the famines, especially in Africa, Ethiopia, places like that, India in the past. This is going to be much wider than that. And it says, this is just some points for you to digest, which is a bad word, I guess, but to understand what could happen if people are not prepared. But it's called the refeeding syndrome. For those in advanced starvation, simply providing food can be fatal. The sudden reintroduction of nutrients can cause what's called the refeeding syndrome, where rapid electrolyte shifts lead to heart failure or sudden death unless managed with specialized therapeutic milks, like F75, which I have no idea what that is, and gradual protocols. You know, not just, you can't just start eating back automatically. The body processes have changed. Even survivors may face permanent consequences such as stunted growth, cognitive impairments, and long-term cardiovascular problems, again, your heart. And then the next phase, guys, is the systemic threshold. It's the phase 5, and it's famine. Humanitarian experts use the Integrated Food Security Phase classification, called the IPC, to identify when a region has reached a state of famine, called phase 5. This is the administrative point of no return where mass death is already occurring. The 2032 rule: famine is declared when 20% of households face an extreme lack of food, 30% of children suffer from acute malnutrition, and 2 people or 4 children per 10,000 die every single day from starvation or related diseases. These are the things we want to avoid if possible. But if it's coming, you've got to prepare, guys. Now, when that starts happening in other countries, for example, here in the U.S. and some of the stronger countries, guys, it begins a little differently. But the point of no return for the USA is not characterized by biological starvation for the general population, but a systemic economic collapse driven by hyperinflation of food and energy. You know, you heard a day's wages for a little piece of bread. Analysts suggest that if the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz lasts for 6 months, roughly through August 2026, the U.S. could face a total societal breakdown as working-class families are priced out of basic survival. And if you don't think that can happen, guys, just look now. If you have to commute to work and pay for the gas prices that rise daily, are you having to cut back on a little bit of food or something else to keep your bills paid? We're just at the beginning. Again, we could face a total societal breakdown as working class families, which is most of the people. I don't think, are politicians considered working class? I've never seen them work. I don't know. Anyway, but we are priced out of basic survival. Now, I mentioned this in the video the other day about this, guys. Now is the time to stock up on survival food, long-term stuff, that regardless of the timing of the event, with a 10 to 20 year shelf life, it will last for a long time. But guys, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that length of time getting through this. The people that are prepared will make it. But one thing, let me say this. If you start stocking up, you keep it on the down low big time, even with your family. Because hunger turns people, your best friends, into your worst nightmares and enemies. Now, here in the U.S., we also rely on a lot of fertilizer imports from the Gulf of America. The urea prices at the New Orleans hub jumped 32% in the first week of March 2026, rising from $516 to $683 per metric ton. So these costs are already stacking up, putting us into that breakdown of the working class families. Now, of course, it's going to coincide with critical March and April planting. Farmers are already considering, again, switching from corn to soybeans because corn requires more nitrogen. Reduced corn yields will eventually drive up the cost of meat, dairy, and poultry. Estimates suggest U.S. grocery prices could rise as much as 8 to 15% in just the coming months. Gas prices have already surged 17 to 22% since this started. Think about it. And it's, of course, people say this, it's a hidden tax. And it is. And it's going to be a hidden tax on your groceries, except you're going to have to pay for it. Now, they're saying that 47.9 million Americans already facing food insecurity before the war. The point of no return is a financial threshold, and it will begin that way. But you got discretionary spending collapse. Lower income households are being forced to choose between fuel for work and food for home. Oxford Economics predict 2026 will see the slowest consumption growth since 2013. 13. Farmers are facing the largest gap in decade between the rising cost of inputs, fertilizer, and fuel, and the prices they receive for crops, threatening the bankruptcy of smaller family farms. We got some big dogs out there that are demons that are buying up a lot of land. Now, Jerome Powell just announced he's not going to lower interest rates again. His derangement syndrome is that bad. Anyway, officials expect the war to worsen inflation through 2026, potentially pushing headline CPI to 4%. Again, that's hidden taxes on everything. And unlike oil, the U.S. has no strategic national reserve for fertilizer, making domestic production unable to scale quickly enough to offset the loss of Gulf imports. If you're going to plant, even if it's just a small garden, which is going to be very important, if you've never done it, you might want to start doing it. But you may want to go to your local farm store and pick up a few bags of fertilizer. Now, that price has gone up, believe me. But it's better than not getting any at all. If even if it's just a small garden or whatever, make sure you got a little bit. Now, natural fertilizer is always better than the chemicals if you can get your hands on it. Now, let's go to Revelation for a moment, guys, because this is the first time it's ever been this clear in the history of mankind, I think. You got these 4 horses. They're going to come very quickly. You don't send one horse at a time in a battle. You send your people in. The white horse is a symbol of conquest and ideology. This represents the initial Rising Line military campaign launched back in June of 2025 and now Operation Epic Fury in February 2026. It is driven by what some describe as a modern holy war, focused on territorial dominance and religious prophecy. Now, the red horse, war, represents the immediate violence and loss of peace. Strikes have targeted the Iranian leadership, including the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, which triggered retaliatory missiles and drone strikes across the Middle East. Everybody involved has lost people, not just Iran. And again, the red horse, this war. What follows that? We got 2 more. Now, again, these 4 horsemen come very quickly, and some describe them as riding side by side. And look at this. The black horse is famine, the cost, the prices. This horseman is directly tied to the disruption of food distribution. The black horse carries scales, signifying the weighing of scarce grain and the hyperinflation of food cost. Again, a day's work for a little piece of bread, right? That's almost the way it is now. Anyway, the blockade of the strait has throttled fertilizer and energy supplies, causing, again, global urea prices to jump 30 to 40% and grocery costs in Iran to soar all the way through, guys. They're already importing food, to many countries in that area because it was that 80% of the food for the Middle East was coming into the strait. So now they're having to fly it in through different carriers. And there's no way you can fly in as much as you could put on these big ocean-going transports. Again, all of this is happening at one time. The 4 horses are riding now. Pale horse, which signifies death, is the final result of the previous 3. Beyond direct combat fatalities, which exceed 2,000 in the first weeks of the 2026 operation, this represents the looming humanitarian catastrophe. The UN World Food Program warns that the combined effects of war and famine could push 45 million more people into acute hunger globally. Guys, and if you look, there's already over 300 million that are there at this point. But this 45 million, guys, they're talking about up to June, and that's very soon. And some people are saying April and May are going to be bad enough. But just quickly highlight these 4 horses. Just keep it in your mind fresh. Again, first, the white horse, or possibly they're running side by side. And we've seen that represented in many forms of art. But again, this conquest, what are we seeing even from the U.S., the new Department of War, things like that, right? You've got the Operation Rising Lion, which really started last June. Now we got Operation Epic Fury. But this Rising Lion, to me, I can't help but think about the verse where the lion will roar from Judah. The top of Mount Carmel will wither. Anyway, it is driven by what some describe again as a modern holy war over territorial dominance and religious prophecy. Then the red horse, war. The black horse is the famine and the cost. And what happens after you have famine and rising cost is the pale horse, death. Now, this is where we're at. I've never seen it in all of my years have all of the signs coming together. Not just Revelation, but the Gog and Magog war. And I think that all of that is tied together. So this is where we're at. You guys get prepared. It's coming very quickly. You can see it. All you got to do is drive past the prices of a gas station, or go in and try to buy some groceries now. And that's been bad for a few years. But now it's about to change everything. What happens, guys, when the grocery stores start to run out of food? People start to run out of food. You have major conflicts internally. Fighting in the grocery stores, riots, killings, robberies to get food. So all of this is piling up, and it's about to hit us. Pray that it doesn't. But we were told it would in one certain time, and it looks like, and I know I've said it before, but the demons have went forward to the kings of the earth and pushed them into this situation through lies and deceit, even demonic possession. And just look around, guys. Look at the leaders of Europe. Look at our leaders. Look at the world. And we're overpopulated in many areas. There's a lot of open land in the U.S. and around the world, but people have always went into the cities. And as soon as that happens, you start running low of everything. And when you have supply disruptions and cost increase, man, Damon thinks he's got some problems right now. He hasn't seen problems yet. They're going to end up riding that dude out of town, tarred and feathered, before it's said and done. I'm talking about his voters. And Trump did a very good thing there. He decided if the voters were that stupid and they were that lazy to where they wanted that much welfare and handouts for everything, then let them have mandamus. Let them collapse into nothing. Maybe next time they'll change their vote with a sense of helping the country, not continuing to bleed it dry. Anyway, guys, we're watching this. You watch it. Be prepared. It's a heads up. Be safe.